Welcome to Unpoured Perspectives. Today we have Andrea Fujarczuk, who is the current program coordinator and professor of artisan distilling at Niagara College. What a mouthful. Welcome to the channel, Andrea.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I am Kevin Dundee. We've got Bobby from Drams and Drips and Joel from Scratch and Scotch. So why don't you take us through, just very quickly, like high level, how you ended up becoming the program coordinator, at Niagara College there.
I guess the short version is I am an accidental academic. I never sent out to even work in the spirits industry. I originally started off with a degree in environmental sciences from the University of Guelph. Then I did a winery and viticulture technician diploma at Niagara College, fell in love with wine, moved to the UK, did an MBA focusing on the global food industries. I was doing my WSET level 4. I won a scholarship that was sponsored by Moët Hennessy, worked for Moët Hennessy in the UK. So those are brands like Glenmorangie and Ardbeg, which, spoiler, are really easy to fall in love with when you are living in the UK. So I got to do the trips to Ardbeg and Glenmorangie, and it was just really the education of a lifetime. But I kind of missed production a bit, so I turned to a whole different leaf. And I ended up working at Thames Distillers in the UK, which produces a crap ton of gin. I don't know if you've ever heard of them before. They're probably one of the, if not the largest farm producer of gin in the world. So basically everyone would come to them and say, I want to make a gin. This is what I want it to taste like. So I'd be part of a team to figure out how to actually make the gin. So I'll still go to the LCBO sometimes, be like, yeah, I know how to make that. And I know how to make that, which is pretty cool. But I missed home, and my French husband said, if you could make gin for all these people over in the UK, why don't you come home and make something over here? So I dragged him to Canada, made him get the whole visa and everything. And we launched our own gin brand, which was available in the LCBO and the Manitoba Liquor Board and all those fun places to deal with. And somehow a job became available at the college. And as a graduate, I knew the dean, and he I applied just on a whim, thinking this could be fun, not thinking that I'd ever really get it. And there I was. I suddenly got a full-time professorship at Niagara College, and I absolutely love it. It's something that you need to really enjoy because you're putting up with a lot of, students who are questioning you all the time. And eventually I decided that whiskey was a place that I really enjoyed and I wanted to get back into. And I started a doctorate out of Heriot-Watt University, and it's led me to some pretty interesting places, to say the least. So, yeah.
Awesome. Amazing. What is your favorite bottle? Let's just start with some general, like high level out there questions.
You know what? It's gonna sound horrible because it's a pricier one, but I think I love the Glenmorangie Signet. Like that is classic to me. I know it's pricier, but you know what? For me, it was one of those first ones that I really fell in love with. I actually started a whiskey club back when I was a student at Niagara College, and the other ones that I really did love were Brook-Laddock.
Whiskey Club, you're in good company here.
Yeah. That was more than a decade and a half ago. So that was like before it was cool. I was into whiskey before whiskey was cool. So
Have you tried the Signet Reserve?
Yeah, it is. It's incredible.
We got to try that at Whiskey Wonderland.
No comment.
No.
I'm like anti Glenmorangie guy. I don't know. I love Ardbeg. I just don't know what it is about Glenmorangie, but I can't
Not
do
for
it.
everybody all the time, right? Like everybody has their favorites, and
It's not that it's bad. I just think it's the price tag. It should be like a quarter of what it is for it.
I think I also have a bit of a bias having worked for them, and also this was 10 years ago before.
I'm sure it wasn't $400 10 years ago.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. It really, really, and in the UK, it's also significantly less expensive.
That's true.
So my affiliation to, the cost of it is very, very different. I just like the chocolate malt on it is very elegant. And also when I was working for them, they were quite innovative. Now I know they do the tail of ice cream and the tail of Tokyo and the tail of cake and all those things that, sometimes I've tried a few of them. Sometimes I love them. Sometimes I'm not as big of a fan of them. Sometimes they're a little bit gimmicky. But the studies that Dr. Bill Lumsden has done in terms of oak aging has really been quite impressive. And he really changed the entire industry with cask finishing. They were the first to introduce a lot of those concepts, which I got a lot of respect for that.
I love Ardbeg Barbecue.
Yeah.
It's like one of the best Ardbegs they've released in like 10 years. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
They're really good at what they do with marketing. They're like marketing geniuses.
Well, it's also crazy because Ardbeg actually used to be owned by Hiram Walker back in the day. And so it was almost like it was turned into bulk whiskey, like no one cared about it. And I had the pleasure of tasting a 1978 Ardbeg, I think, when I was over there. And later, a bottle of that went for auction for tens of thousands of dollars. And I was like, oh, I got to try that once. That was kind of cool. But
I'm the youngest of three. My brother is 10 years older than me. And one of my first introductions into whiskey was Glenmoe 10-year.
Yeah.
And I remember it. But then as I continued along my whiskey journey, I got into the Isla stuff. And the first bottle I actually went and at that time splurged on was an Ardbeg 10-year. And
Classic.
that was one of my favorites. And I'd have people over, I'd say, you got to try this, you got to try this. And either they absolutely hated it, they couldn't handle the intensity of it, or they also fell in love with it. So I think those two brands that you mentioned, they actually hold a real special place for me too.
People, when they love Ardbeg, they become obsessed with it. And I remember like being at the distillery and people showing up with tattoos of it. And like it's like their pilgrimage, like their ultimate dream in life is to go to the Ardbeg distillery. And I remember pinching myself being like, I'm here for work. But I also feel like there's something about the iodine that it turns into this cult where it's like either you love it or you don't. It's Marmite. Either you get it and you feel it, like it's like almost like this cultish music that it intoxicates you. And it's like when people don't like it, you don't take offense, or you're like, oh, they just don't get it. They're not part of it, right?
When I was in Sweden last year, there's a Ardbeg embassy in Stockholm, and we got to go there. They have a crazy bar there, and it was broken into a few weeks before we got there. So someone stole like some crazy bottles. But we got to have, they do like Ardbeg infused like meatballs.
Oh, cool.
They're fantastic. So if you're ever in Stockholm, go to the embassy and have like Ardbeg meatballs. They're amazing.
That is good to know. That is really, really good to know.
Hard bowls.
Yeah,
Ooh.
It's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool like little restaurant too, so it's kind of neat inside of it. But as far as like Canadian whiskey, do you have like a favorite Canadian whiskey?
You know what? I like an actual like one SKU whiskey. Like, what's my go-to? Or
I mean, either
or
or.
distillery.
You have like a go-to Canadian whiskey, and then you have like a special one.
You know what? I'm a big fan of the oats from Tim at Gretzky's. Like that one, I feel like Tim's turned that like it's in a completely different direction that it was originally going in. And I got a lot of respect. He's got a wine background just like me. I've got a lot of respect for him. And you know what? The cool thing about him is that he's got, because the size of the distillery that he's working at, he's got a lot of people in the background, whether it's marketing or whatnot, but he also has the ability and the budget to do something a little bit more than, your typical small distillery. And I remember going in there and being like, this is okay. But then simultaneously, now I've gone there recently and it's like almost everything I'm like, okay, that's some, not everything is like my absolute favorite, but it's really good for what it is. And a good example of this is actually their maple cask, which I have right behind me, obviously. Like, is this my favorite everyday real like whiskey? Maybe not, but if I want an old fashioned, I just pour myself this instead. And sorry, go ahead.
Did you see what we did with Tim and the oats?
No, I didn't.
I'll send you the picture. So we were like, I've known Tim for a few years, so I've had the opportunity to try the oats and a bunch of other stuff, even stuff that's still releasing yet, over the last 3 or 4 years. So we had a little bit of fun. We were able to get like almost about 100 bottles of the oats
Wow.
for our group before anybody else actually got it. Like Joel and I actually like drove to the distillery,
Wow,
backed up to
cool.
the door, and literally they were like loading our truck up with cases, and then we actually stopped at 40 Creek on the way, gave Chris the bottle of the oats. uh but I'll send you the where is it here? I'll send you the label that we did on Messenger so you can see. Sorry, and you can continue.
No worries.
I'll add it. I'll put it up on the screen.
Oh, okay, yeah, if
for
you
our
got
viewers.
do it. So I had a little bit of fun. I had a little bit of fun with the label.
I'm saying send me the label as well, and I'll
okay.
add it to the video.
Gotcha. Okay, I'll post it in the podcast group so you can see it.
Yeah, all good. So, so you started in like going to school here in Canada in Niagara, right?
Yeah.
And then you somehow ended up at school in like the UK.
Yeah.
And then you started working for Ardbeg and Glenmorangie.
Yeah.
And like, so like a lot of people, that would be like where it's at.
Yeah.
And then you decided to come back and do more schooling or no, you did more schooling there. What was the thing there?
No, so you know what? Working for LVMH is like a dream. It really is. Like you get to go to try all the best champagnes and all the best whiskeys, and it's very, very intoxicating. And I was very young at the time, and I suddenly had this moment where I realized that like I wasn't working in sales at the time. I've worked there kind of in sales and marketing. And I looked around and I go, where do I see myself in 5 or 10 years? And when you realize you're like, I don't really see a job here that I want to be doing because the salespeople were very salesy and the marketing people were very marketing. And what I mean by that is like, we would have people who were coming off maternity leave and suddenly working for Ardbeg who had never tried Ardbeg before, who didn't understand Ardbeg. And it was like they had come from a different division of LVMH and they needed to fill a position and it was cool. Yeah. But like I just kind of realized that I wanted something a little bit different. I'd come from production. Like I thought I was going to be a winemaker. And so I kind of went back to I ended up resigning and I thought, I need to get back to that day to day where I'm actually feeling like I'm contributing to something. And so that's where I ended up in the distillery.
And then you came back and you went to school first for distilling, or you just went to a distillery?
So I started my own virtual distillery with my husband. The two of us created our own SKU available at the LCBO and Manitoba Liquor Board. And then in the middle of that, like I was maybe like 6 months in from having released it, this job at the college showed up. And I applied and I got here. So I've been at the college since 2019. The program launched in 2018. And in the middle of it, I kind of decided that I was getting irritated with the Canadian whiskey industry. And then now I go back to school part-time for doing a doctorate at Heriot-Watt University in Scotland.
Okay. But you said two words that were very sort of curious there that I think our viewers or our listeners would probably like key on. What is a virtual distillery?
Okay, so that's a very good question. The way that I describe a virtual distillery is if it's almost like think of it like a bakery, right? If I've got my grandmother's secret cake recipe and I want to create it, but I don't have the proper baking ovens for said recipe, I'm not going to go out and create an entire kitchen just for this one type of cake that I want to make. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to go to a bakery. I'm going to give them all the ingredients. I'm going to give them the recipe, direct them exactly how to make it. And then at the end of the day, they're going to produce it for me. I am going to pick it up and I'm going to pay them for production. And that's exactly what a virtual distillery is. It is somewhere where you don't have your own brick and mortar. You're paying somebody physically to do it. But in most situations, in our situation, we had already developed the recipe. We already knew our SKU. We had everything already organized.
So contract distilling.
Kind of, yeah.
Is the virtual distillery an industry term, or is that an Andrea Fujarczuk?
That might have been something I inherited from the UK. Every once in a while,
Okay.
like I inherit these things, and I'm just like, oh, I didn't realize.
I basically hear that would just be contract distilling, right?
Yeah, the same thing.
Yeah.
It just sounds
Okay.
cooler, virtual distillery.
Well, it's you know what? It also may be a winemaking term that was used 10 plus years ago. That's how a lot of them started, like 2027 Cellars. I don't know if you know Kevin Panagapka, but that's how he started off. Now he's got brick and mortar. So yeah.
Cool.
Okay, so now
That's
we
you.
sort of.
Do you have a name, or are we allowed?
Oh, so I did that for a few years, and we had it was called Northern Landings Ginberry. It was a cranberry gin. And the reason why I loved this gin so much was because it used actual cranberries from Ontario. It used no flavor, no added flavorings, no added colorings, no sugar. And it was like a pink in color. It was all natural and not even natural flavorings. And I love that for Canada. I really felt like Canada needed it. And we launched in 2018, I think it was. And we did very well. The problem was that we had to do all of our deliveries ourselves. And it just kind of killed me after a while. Like we were making a bit of money. And I was just like, it's not worth it because I'd be dropping off a 6-pack here and a 6-pack there. And, at the end of the day,
everywhere a 6-pack.
Yeah. But like, and I heard you guys talking about this on one of your previous episodes. It's like the amount that the LCBO sells to you, pays you for that bottle is next to nothing. And we were selling at $45, and the LCBO I think was paying us like $12.50. And you're just like, what's the point?
Yeah.
What's the point?
Yeah. Obviously you stopped, but did you sell it to somebody?
No, I still have dreams. We had some offers, to be honest with you. We still have dreams of figuring out whether we can do brick and mortar, because if I ever do want to do this, it's always in the back of my head. Like I have it all planned out what I would want to do. I think it's turned into more of a pipe dream, but in some way, shape, or form, it's worth more to me to hold on to because like your brand becomes your baby. And if I were to see that turn into anything else, I would be absolutely crushed. So
Fair enough.
maybe it's my retirement plan, guys. Like we all need a retirement plan.
I mean, if you're already thinking about retirement.
Sounds like you're going for something very genuine, and that kind of speaks to your character. I think
Thank you.
this is one of the reasons why we selected you for the podcast was because you had a lot of interesting things to say about the state of Canadian liquor in general, and your brand, what it sounds like you're trying to do, reflected that very much.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's funny because people like when you put out a brand, it's scary, and then people go, "What makes your product different?" And I was like, "It's simple. It's a cranberry gin." Like we had to put like, what are the ingredients on it? I was like, cranberries, gin. I think that's it. And I was like, yes.
There's no.
I feel you.
Yeah.
With all of that, yeah. I think moving along in sort of that direction, right? I think it makes sense now to sort of get into your doctorate. Now, on your Instagram page, you sort of explain or try to connect the audience to your doctorate in 3 different parts. But take us through that. And as I understand it, things have evolved over time. But let's start at the beginning.
My doctor, I called myself an accidental academic, and this is like the reason why I say this is because I never set out to do this. But if I see a problem and things irritate me, I want to fix it. And especially after living in the UK for as long as I did, I must have been there for, I don't know, 7 years or something like that. You talk about Canadian whiskey, it happens. And every time, like you get to say, oh, I don't really like Canadian whiskey. It's not really my thing. And I remember when Crown Royal one for Northern Harvest rye. I was living in the UK, and I would bring in a bottle and I would be like, yeah, it's okay. Is it the best in the world? Like, I don't know if you guys remember that.
There was a difference between batch one and all the rest since
everything else.
no, like since then, batch one still is, it tastes much different than what's released now.
Yeah, you know what? I think it's good value for money. Like, I have no problem with it. It was just like, is it the best in the world? And kind of spun out of control, especially in the media.
So,
and
that was right at the time when I was getting into whiskey, like right very early. And I said to my friends, oh, this new whiskey, just one whiskey in the world. We need to get some. And I went and picked up a case of it. And I'd never ever done that before. And a few of my friends, we divvied it out, and I think I still have some of those bottles, and I've never drank them.
Oh, really? Oh, what a shame.
A batch one, yeah.
You gotta make some cocktails.
Rye and Coke. Or
If
ginger ale.
only I were a cocktail man.
Rye and ginger ale is pretty easy.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, we interrupted you.
No worries. I guess the thing is that I realized that Canadian whiskey is not talked about all the time in like this amazing way, number one. And then I also realized at the end of the day, Canadians, we don't talk our own whiskey up. We are the worst brand ambassadors for our own bloody whiskey. And it really started to piss me off. And I thought, okay, well, it's because my first stop was that I'm like, oh, it's because of our rye. Our rye should be 51% rye. We don't have this rule. I don't understand it. And I started calling up some people, and it was interesting to hear the reactions, but everyone would be like, you go down that road, but basically you're never going to, like, no one's going to care. No one's going to listen to you. And the government is the way that it is. And so it made me think, I'm like, okay, well, we need to understand what is making people think not so highly of Canadian whiskey. So I ended up with a doctoral dissertation with the topic of consumer values and the role of country of origin in the Canadian whiskey market. So what this means is,
oof.
Yeah, I know.
That's okay.
I know.
Any doors.
Eddie.
Yeah, it's a lot. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to look at consumer values.
Can you just say that again?
I know. Okay. So consumer values and the role of country of origin.
Okay.
So I'm trying to intertwine these two concepts in the Canadian whiskey market. So what this means is there's consumer values, what consumers value, what we like, what we don't like, and then country of origin. So what this means is when you're picking up a bottle of scotch, when you're picking up a bottle of American whiskey and or bourbon, what are people already thinking? What do they like about it? What don't they like about it? Why do they prefer one against the other? And I realized that no one's really done any research on this. No one has really even said, do people value scotch more than Canadian whiskey? I bet you 9 out of 10 that said they would make it like say it's more expensive. But has anyone ever proved this before? And once you've proved it, why is it that way? And more importantly, we as Canadians, how can we change that perception, right? If I were to give you the top 5 volume producers of whiskey in the world, you know them all. What are they?
Like it's
Johnny Walker.
No, by country.
Oh.
Scotch.
Scotland. USA probably.
US, yeah.
Canada has to be in there.
Canada, yeah.
I mean, maybe Japan,
India.
but I was thinking India, yeah.
Yeah.
Japan and Ireland. The problem with India is that it's not quantifiable because they may do it, but their whiskey is not labeled technically the same. So it's kind of like they could be anywhere on the board and no one really knows. But the thing is, if you were to ask your average consumer, what's the most expensive and the least expensive whiskey, where do you think Canada would end in those 5?
Probably
definitely least expensive. Yeah.
Okay, but why? Right? Is it that we make bad whiskey?
Sometimes.
Well, there's obviously a huge history role that is played there, right? And large reasons for that. And I think our history in a lot of ways is very similar to the Irish history.
Yeah.
Not for the reasons, but the results
Yeah, yeah.
right, was that we had, from what I understand, a bunch of distilleries, and that dwindled down to 4 or 5 in the same way that the Irish distillers did. And now, we're sort of trying to come back up.
You're totally right. The difference is that Ireland has clawed its way out.
Well, it's funny too because like I went to the States last year, and you go to the store and you look at like the Canadian section. I know like one out of the entire shelf. I've never heard of any of these places before.
They mass produce and send it down south, right? Like that's it's just we're missing on the board. Like and the coolest thing about Canada is we have a wicked history. We really do. And it's taken me a long time to realize that we just haven't embraced it, and we haven't been telling our story properly. And in fact, we talk ourselves down. And I used to be this big advocate is we need to make rye 51%. It's not rye if it's not 51%. And now I'm actually, and this has come from this whole.
But is that just the perception of like American rye generally?
It's exactly what it is. And
I'm a 95.5 American rye kind of person. I like the higher rye. I don't like very many American ryes that are 51%. I don't. I like the 95.5. And I like good Canadian rye whiskey, but it's knowing what's available. Which again, like you said, nobody knows. Like we did like the video I did of all the stuff that we've got for the podcast. Everybody's like, "What is that stuff? I've never seen almost any of it." And I'm like, "Exactly." I'm like, "No one knows."
Yeah, we make good stuff. Nobody knows. And
so one of the things is that Scottish distilleries make a very large effort to develop a relationship with all of their consumers, right? All of the distilleries are places you visit. They're beautiful. They have these large tours. They've got these stories that they tell. They enchant all of the visitors, right? And one of the things that I have sort of been thinking about in my journey as well is that we don't have that, right? Like I don't have my local Springbank or my local Lagavulin. Why is it that I can't go and visit? Like I mean, I can, but it's not the same, right? Walking into a distillery that is basically just a production facility with a front house store, just it's not the same as going to Scotland and touring Islay and getting all of the stories. And so I think Canadians don't tell those stories. They don't look at Canadian whiskey that way. But it's also, I think, the actual brands themselves. Even the bigger brands, right? From what I understand, Alberta Distillers is only just now starting to do some of this stuff, right? None of that stuff existed before.
One of the observations I made, and I want to say this was back when we had the Olympics in Canada, was that Canadians have a reputation for being quantity drinkers over quality drinkers.
Good point.
So that means beer, right?
Yeah.
Molson.
Tons and tons of beer. Remember Molson Canadian, I am Canadian.
Yeah.
That marketing thing went crazy, right?
My name is Joe.
Yeah, that was huge back then. But I mean, from that perspective, have we essentially pigeonholed ourselves into that sort of cast where now we're trying to weasel our way out of it? And no, everybody knows us as those massive quantity drinkers of beer.
It's an interesting point, because there's one thing you've also said is Canadians were very humble, right? And we don't like to brag, and that's part of our issue too, is that we do make amazing Canadian whiskey, but we apologize, right?
Sorry.
So I'm sorry. We know it's not quite Scotch, right? Like it literally that's what we as Canadians do. And
we need the South Park like clippets to come up. Sorry.
Yeah, like it's starting to really irritate me. And coming back to Kevin's point about the storefront, right? Like it's not a whole experience. We don't value it like this. We don't look at it this way. And we do have the history. It's like you talked about this earlier. It's like, well, Scotch has the history. You tell me what Canada doesn't have in terms of a history compared to the US. We've got a wicked history. And the coolest thing about us is something we haven't really leaned into. And it's the fact that we blend. That's what makes us amazing. We are blenders, right? We are honestly blended. And that's what I think makes us special. And that goes back to, historically speaking, 5% rye, 95% something else. That's how Canadian whiskey was originally made. And now it's interesting because the rest of the world is telling us, oh, you don't make rye whiskey the right way. And I'm like, dude, we were the ones who kept rye whiskey alive. We established it. This is our wheelhouse for the last 200 years. And now, especially because of Ryegate, which I'm sure you guys are well aware of Ryegate, there's a lot of people telling us that we have to change the way that we work. Well, no, because when we put rye on a bottle, it's an indication of flavor. We're not trying to tell anybody that it's more than 51%. We're indicating it like you get a lemon cake. You don't expect it to be more than 50% lemon or 51% lemon. That's what the Canadian promise is when it's on a bottle. If you want to put something more,
that's a promise, because isn't there tons of bottles of Canadian rye whiskey on the shelf that has 0% rye in it?
As long as it tastes and smells like whiskey, a rye whiskey, that is the promise it makes.
Even if it's 100% corn.
That is the promise.
It just needs to smell like rye.
I don't agree that it shouldn't include anything, but it's the literally that's the promise that it makes. I personally do believe it should include something, but
I don't think you should be allowed to use the word 100% rye in a bottle if it contains 0% rye.
No. If it says 100%, it should be 100%.
There's some Canadian club bottles that say rye on it, and there's no rye in the bottle. It's all corn.
But the difference is 100% rye,
yes.
or just rye.
Yeah.
No, I'm pretty sure there's a couple bottles that say 100% rye, and there's no rye in the bottle.
All right. Well, that's like.
But I mean, there's lots of weird stuff.
You'll have to find them. You'll have to find them for me after the podcast. And
maybe it just says rye and it's not. I don't know. Whatever. Regardless of the fact, if it says rye or 100% rye, if there's no rye, it shouldn't say it.
I agree with that. I fully agree.
That's totally misleading.
Well, I think that's part of we've got massive transparency issues, right? I think it goes back to how we do it, how it's the promise of it versus how people exploit the rule, right?
Yeah.
People exploit it, yes.
So it's like the organic thing. You can say it's organic and it only needs to be 10% or something, right?
Yeah.
Get it. And we had this conversation before too, and it's the whole, I like to bring up that 9% rule, the 9.09%. I think it should be, I don't think you need to say that what you're using to be in it, but that you're using it, I think would be good to add. I don't care what you're doing with it. I mean, obviously I'd like to know everything that's in the bottle, but I'd be just happy with okay, we're using it in our bottle.
Maybe some of our listeners don't know this 9.09% rule.
Well, we have a smarter person than the rest of us here. Maybe she can explain.
I was gonna say, you go for this one. This is all you.
Let's go, Joel. Come on, test your knowledge.
We've got the experts here. I'm just the noob here.
The noob.
So you can use. Let's see if I can get this right, because I was looking at it, but I don't have a great memory. Anyways, you can use 1/11th, which essentially boils down to 9.09% of the volume. I think after the 1/11th has been blended in, of any wine or spirit. I'm not sure if it has to have a minimum age. It might have to have a minimum age of 2 years, I think, or 3 years.
It has to be aged, yeah.
So it says.
So
it says at 9.9% or less of a coloring, flavoring, or other spirit, as long as this addition has been aged for 2 years. So we're going past just spirits, coloring and flavoring.
But you're not, though, because I looked at this last night and they classify flavoring as the wine or spirit.
Yeah. So it is, it is what the wine or the spirit that is aged. So the likes of tequila, you can add. The likes of sherry. There are certain things that, you can add. And I mean, if Paradigm is a great example. They made an amazing whiskey with I think it was sherry they added to theirs. Yeah. And they won big time, but it's declared on the bottle. They tell you what is in there. And this is one of the things that it's a really hard, this is really difficult to discuss with a lot of people, especially small scale producers, because you're like, this is a problem we need to evaluate. And they're like, my people don't care. Like my customers who come in, they don't care that I put 9.09 as something else. But when you talk about international influencers, you know, they're tasting something and they go, well, this is all fine and dandy, but is it 9% sherry in here? You know, like, how is that fair when I'm comparing that to, you know, a cask aged sherry or, you know, there's so many other things that you can do in Canada that you can't do anywhere else. And
but they say that you said like their customers don't care that it's in there, but that's because they don't know.
No, it's more so that they don't, like, their customers have such low, like they're just like, oh, this is great. You know what I mean? Like,
so yeah, I think most customers, right? Like, I think so. These minutia, right? These details, I think, are really for the enthusiasts, and the enthusiasts really care, and they care strongly about this thing. And I think to some degree, a normal consumer would also care. But I think after you told them about it, they'd be like, yeah, I don't really like that about it. So if you said, oh, this is your favorite whiskey, did you know that this says rye, but there's actually no rye in it?
yeah,
I think the normal consumer would go, oh, you know, that's disappointing. But I don't think that would change their view on whether they like that whiskey or not.
No, it's true. I don't think there'd be like, I think like 90% wouldn't care. They like it. It's cheap. They don't care, right?
Well, here's the difference, though, that I will say is that you've got your international whiskey writers. These are the ones who are saying this is what you should be drinking. And they will not review certain Canadian whiskeys because they don't know what's in the bottle. So that's where it starts to make a difference, where it's like, okay, what direction is Canada going in? And I think that's like the biggest question is no one is really trying to figure out, like, okay, is it something we like? How do we lean into it? How do we manage it? How do we, you know, talk to the consumer about it? And Kevin touched on this a little bit earlier when it's like, you know, the Scotch distilleries get together and they talk about stuff. Like, what do we want to do? And Canadian distillers are more like, they're on survival mode all the time. So they don't have the time or energy to even think about a lot of this kind of stuff. They're just like, can I sell that case so I can pay my rent? Right? Like that is their approach a lot of the times.
True.
So, and I think
well, look what's happening with the tequila thing right now, right? With Casamigos and Don Julio are getting sued because it's potentially, you know, they're saying it's 100% blue agave when potentially until it comes out, it could be just, at this point, they don't really know what's in it, but they're saying that you know, it's a premium product and people are now like, they're finally starting to wake up and be like, is it?
Well, and I think there's a huge shift towards authenticity and transparency. And like, this is Canada's opportunity to jump on that and, you know, talk about what we're actually putting out there. However, let's be honest, most people aren't even going in that direction. So, and these are some of the things I really hope to prove with my dissertation of looking at consumer values in country of origin. And that's kind of what I'm trying to put together as a roadmap for distilleries around the world and regions around the world to be like, this is how you could increase the value of your product.
I
unplugged a bunch of light bulbs and now I'm trying to make up for the light. That's
we can all see.
That's way too bright. God, it's the grace.
Are you in a tanning bed right now?
Yeah.
That's what happens when you have a big screen TV in front of you. Yeah. Okay, there we go. Okay.
So I think, because I think, Andrea, this sort of like leads into a place where you're sort of going, and maybe I'm just sort of prompting you, because you have in your 3-part series on your doctorate, you have talked about certification trademark, right? So that would be a way for us to not bother about changing legislation.
Yeah.
But indicate to those writers, you know, that it doesn't have these things that they might be worried about, etc. And also to the consumer as an indication of quality or maybe labeling standards or whatever.
I'm so glad that you watched those videos, and I'm sorry because some of them are pretty long-winded.
You're so Canadian.
Yeah. There's me being Canadian. We need the South Fork pop up. Sorry. It's, you know what? I've really enjoyed going down this rabbit hole of learning about country of origin, because we as Canadians are obsessed with the fact that we can't change legislation. And we're just like, oh, we can't change legislation, abort mission, right? Like that's well, what are we going to do? It's never going to change. And that's how we stop. That's how we start and end the conversation. And it drives me up the wall, because I actually have, like, some of the Nordic countries are talking to me saying, oh, I hear you're studying this. Like, what have you found out? How can we, raise our perceived value? How can we establish ourselves? And meanwhile, I'm here in Canada, and like the Canadian distillers don't really, like, they're just like, okay, cool. Like, you're doing something on this. But there's multiple things you can do. So one of them is a certification trademark, which you mentioned, and that is exactly what VQA has already done. So VQA is Vintners Quality Alliance. And what they do is when they put this label on a bottle, it signifies that it reaches a minimum standard. And for example, for VQA, it's that if you have for example, a single varietal, it is 85% that varietal. It is from a certain region, 100% of that. So there's certain qualities that, means that it is of a VQA standard. And if you bring this up to a lot of distillers, they get hesitant right away, because they think that you are like throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and you're like, you need to do A, B, C, and you have to do these things really strict.
You're telling them how to distill.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is like, I don't want to tell the distillers how to distill. I really don't. I don't think that's the solution. But what I do think is to give the consumer that connection and that assurance that you can trust what's on the label.
You want to give the distiller a way to communicate effectively with the consumer and with whiskey enthusiasts.
And develop trust with the consumer, right? So when you have that logo on it, and I'm talking about very basic things. And this is, back to Bobby's original point of like, okay, where does it go? Like, is there any rye on it? Well, if it has the logo, it must contain in the blend that grain. Simple as that. Or you can use the 9.09 rule, but you have to declare it on the label, right? Simple.
It'd be hard.
Yeah. Very minimal things. If you're going to do it single malt, it has to be vertically integrated. To us, like, it's just one of those things that they're not really difficult things to achieve, but we need a way to signify to the consumer that what we're doing is authentic. And, I've done with the research, there's actually a journal article written by a Canadian professor, I think out of might be University of Calgary. And the study shows that VQA certified wines fetch more money on average than international blends. So the whole point is that this is the whole thing about wines in Canada, is that you've got two main categories: international blends, IBs, and then you've got VQA. So by doing this, you are giving distillers the option and saying, these ones will be certified, and these ones, maybe it's not worth it, or it doesn't really speak to us. And so you're creating different categories where if you want to join the club, that's cool. And if not, that's fine too.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Are you saying that if you're in the club, all of your stuff needs to have this certification trademark, or will distillers be able to say, this bottle that I made meets this trademark and this bottle that I made does not?
So what you're indicating is, I was actually going to talk about this next, so it's perfect. It's called a collective mark. So what this means that you can do something instead where it's like everybody, if you have this label, everything you produce is certified. So that's like you're part of a group. Or you can just do the certified route, which is what we were talking about earlier. It's like based on SKU. So you can have some SKUs that have it and some SKUs that don't, just like VQA, right? So you can go to Peller just down the road from me, and some of them will be IB and some of them will be VQA. But that gives distillers more freedom. I think it's like turned to a very scary word, this idea of certification trademark, but it allows us to hold the way we want to communicate to consumers. It's like us taking back the power rather than the government.
So my question is I don't know how much you've gone and asked people, but from the craft side of it to the bigger people, and then is there like much conversation or no conversation at all. And then also we talked about like where the Canadian Spirit Association or whatever it's called, like their stand against or for, and then how all three play together.
So it's been a really wild ride because like Canada just doesn't have the structure that in so many different ways, the way that Scotland or the US has. And it's a real shocker to most people when you say that, you know, for example, we don't have an association across Canada where anyone can join that is less than $25,000 as a buy-in. That shocks people, right? And
I mean, hundreds of dollars would be, you know, like $25,000 would bankrupt me.
yeah, and that's the reality. And for those who have the money, like that's cool. That's great. But like it just there's so many the problem is we've fragmented so much already. There's the Ontario Craft Distillers Association, there's the BC Craft Distillers Association. There are all these different distillery associations that everyone's kind of sick and tired of associations. But at the end of the day, there's nothing that really brings us together. And this EU rye situation, which I'm sure you guys are all well aware of, is the greatest example of like Canada not like who do they talk to? Who do they talk to? If they talk to some like one of these different associations, they're only talking to a fragment of the people and the organizations. And so here's a huge opportunity where we need to get together and decide if this is something we want to do. And back to, you know, Bobby's point originally was what is the feedback? And the irony is that I've talked to a few people about this, and somebody asked me the best question. They go, "Do you just have ideas and you want to put them into action? Like, is that really it?" Like, and I thought it was a really good question, to be honest with you. And the reason why they asked me that, I realized later, was not to offend me by any means. It was more so the idea of, why do you care so much? And the distillers don't seem to care as much as you do. And that was the honest truth. Right? Like I don't believe Canadian distillers or Canadians in general are concerned with the product positioning of Canadian whiskey.
But do you think it would make a difference on the worldscape if 100%. There was? Okay.
Can you imagine? Like, you have to remember that Japan has gone through this. Scandinavia is going through this now. And every single time they get positive media because they're taking us towards a step towards more transparency for the consumers, right? We as Canada, we're just like.
So this sort of like, and I think our last previous podcast sort of hit on this a little bit. And I think the whole associations bit also is sort of a symptom of the same problem. Canada is very wide. It's very different. You know, all the provinces are in fact very, you know, different socially, politically, economically. Distillers in BC are dealing with different problems than distillers in Ontario, are dealing with different problems in Alberta and, you know, all of the other provinces. And do you think that perhaps maybe that is part of the reason as to why they don't care, or they don't see how, you know, someone from Ontario will care about the problems in BC or will be able to solve those problems for them? Or they may not want someone from Ontario or BC or Alberta, you know, to solve the problems of another province. Do you think that is part of the issue here?
100%. Like you've nailed it. That is the fragmentation of us, the size of us, the different issues between. We've got two different main issues, and one of them is the size, and the other one is the province by province, and the last one, sorry, is the big versus small, right? Because you've got that's how we've kind of parceled ourselves out. I'm Ontario big, I'm Ontario small, I'm East Coast, I'm West Coast, right? Like it's by the time you divide it all up. But here's what people are forgetting, and this is the reason why I'm doing this dissertation, is because we share something in common whether we want to or not, and that's called collective reputation. And collective reputation means that at the end of the day, we share something in common, and whether we like it or not, your reputation is going to affect my reputation. And this is an example of a study that I'm doing. And this is the reason why I'm trying to do this, to prove to people the importance of it, is that you guys may not remember this, but there was a big dairy scandal from China back in 2008. And there was issues with the quality, and it wasn't, and infants died from this. It was obviously very negative. But the thing is that there were dairy producers that actually were not living up to the standard. And then there were dairy producers so there were and were not. And those dairy producers that did not pass standard, after even when they did pass standards, their revenue decreased by 84%. Do you think those that were always up to code were affected by this?
For sure.
Yeah, they were. And any guesses by how much percentage their revenue went down?
People were skipping.
65.
Probably the same.
64%.
Yeah, a lot.
That was 1% off.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, quality is a huge thing.
But the thing is, their quality was always there. They could have been
it's
producing
the fear, right?
But that's exactly the power of collective reputation.
Yeah.
So the idea being that our collective reputation would better enable us to market our whiskeys, say, into the States or into the UK, etc., because our collective reputation would be higher, better, stronger, faster.
It's true, but like also let's get past the States and beyond. What about Canada? What if we were able to get more money for Canadian producers within Canada, right? Like that's
even just access to markets in Canada. You're right. We cannot get into BC. Why can I not sell my whiskey in BC?
No, there's a million reasons why.
And it's so funny too, even like with the tariff situation, and then they're like, "Oh, we're gonna make, we'll allow, Canadian stuff to filter through Canada." Like, do people not realize that this has been going on for already so many years already? Like, you could order from this place and that place already. Like, was it just so hush that everyone didn't think they were allowed to do it, and now, oh, we're gonna make it so that you can do that? Like, who didn't know that I shouldn't say that. Everybody didn't know that you could do it. But it's mind blowing where like anything you talk about alcohol outside of the LCBO is so taboo. It's so hush. You can't talk about it. Like, you can't be ordering from this place. You can't be ordered from here. Like, if you're not, like, you're crazy. The LCBO has everything we need, and you don't need to go anywhere. No, what? Like, are you crazy? Like, I don't understand that.
Well, okay, so because that also is a prompt, in fact, because in 2019, Andrea, you were on the Agenda TVO. I mean, I don't know how to pronounce it, but you made the point that 4% of Ontario spirits came from Ontario.
4% of
spirits sold in the LCBO.
Yeah.
Sorry. True.
Yeah.
4%.
Only 4%.
That's insane. Yeah, and it's all like one company.
So I actually I did have a follow-up question that I'd created for this specific purpose. Do you have any further data in relation to that? Do you know if the number has gone up at all?
I don't have that data, but I can probably figure that out. I actually went through the LCBO website and counted it out by myself at the time.
Oh, okay.
Out of curiosity to see, because the thing is, back in 2019, the alcohol industry was very, very different, and it was even worse than it is right now. And I knew getting on this show, I didn't know what the questions were gonna be, so I had to be prepared for anything. I was just memorizing stats and like just doing my best. But at the end of the day, they asked me if there's anything that could be done. And one of the things that I did point out is that when you walk into an LCBO, almost right away, you're always encountering VQA wine. It's right there, front and center. And what still boggles my mind to this very day is there is generally not a section for Canadian spirits. Why is that? Because it doesn't cost them anything to do that.
But every LCBO I've ever been in, there's a Canadian section.
No, Canadian whiskey.
Yeah, all the whiskey's in one spot.
But not like Ontario section.
Oh, I got you.
Like,
Okay.
you think about like wines and the way that that's organized. I would love to see a local highlight, right? Of just this is all locally produced.
That's true. Okay.
And it was interesting because I walked into an LCBO in Ancaster about 3 weeks later. And I was doing like drop-offs, as I was saying earlier, for my gin. And I walk in with my 6 kitten pack of 6 and, dropping it off. And this woman walks up to me from the LCBO and she's like, "You're from the agenda." And I was like, yeah, crazy. Like, only person who's ever recognized me from the show. One person. And she's like, "I watched your show." And she like grabbed me and she walked me to the side of the LCBO and she's like, "Look what I did." And she's like, "This is my Ontario section. Look at it." And she's like, "I'm a store manager and we have the ability to do this. And I thought your suggestion was great." And I was like, "This is amazing." Like, how
That's
cool
awesome.
is that?
That's really awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, it's just, we don't have to, I think the thing is like, we don't have to make big changes. We just
Affecting change one LCBO at a time.
yeah.
But it's weird though, because I've heard lately too, through people that I know and stuff in the industry, that like LCBO is actually turning down Canadian whiskey as much as they're saying, and the government's saying, buy, we want to, showcase Canadian. I hear they're actually turning down Canadian products, which is stupid in my opinion. But it's also like, why? I guess, I mean, we should have them on the show. Well, I don't understand, like, why the cost to have them on the show? Like, to me, LCBO has always been about quantity over quality. So, like, obviously, smaller producers just can't give what the requirement would be to have, 600 cases of something to go to a few. But I just don't understand, like, why they can't bring in, like, a skid of something for, give a case or something, do like you said, like a showcase of like one thing, and if it goes well, it goes well. Like, I don't understand why they make it so difficult for local people or just Canadian whiskey in general, if you're not Hiram Walker or Lot 40 or Crown Royal or whatever, like to make it. Like, I obviously it's questions you can't answer, but it's like,
oh, but I will say, like, how do I say this? So when we were a SKU at the LCBO, we were considered direct delivery, right? So that meant we were a local producer. We could drop off our own stuff. So they have different programs, right? They can also do the vintages program, right? Where you can just be like limited amounts. And a lot of times we have to remember the people. So those people I was dealing with the LCBO, those were on the floor. Though they were store managers or product consultants.
yeah.
And sometimes, like, it's like Joel said, one LCBO store at a time.
But did they test your stuff though?
No, it was they had bought my stuff and then
they don't need to test it to sell it?
No, you just
doesn't the LCBO test everything before they sell?
They test it, so you have to send in sample bottles, but
Yeah.
they do it like for the LCBO, and then store by store you just drop off cases.
Okay.
So the whole thing is, it had already been accepted to the LCBO, but by going in at the store level, you're able to talk to them and say, "Will you buy this and this and this?" So like this, the store manager gets to decide what they buy and how much. They just have to make sure they hit their targets. So you're I guess the point is, like Joel's comment is like, we can start from the ground up. When you're talking about getting listings, like that you got to look at the different programs that you're going into, and that's like head office. And that's where it gets a little bit more complicated, because like somebody said in your previous episodes, it's like the tastemakers. There's like 2 or 3 people who buy all spirits for the entire province. And, they've got to introduce, like your point, you have to introduce new programs for local producers that do limited amounts.
So it's more of the LCBO needs training and somebody with a meter stick to go smack some hands in.
You said that, not me. But
okay.
I mean, the LCBO is it's a whole 6-show series of problems in information and history, right? I mean, there is I think a 2-hour show that somebody has produced about the history of the LCBO and why it is the way it is.
Yep. We need private here.
There's a lot of it that goes back to the 1930s and the temperance movement, and there's a lot of it that has to do with lobbying and liquor and the potential health effects and all of that stuff. I don't know that we can solve the LCBO in this chat.
Yeah, no, it's a big one. As my 3-year-old daughter would say, it's a big guy.
Yeah, it's interesting. Should we pour something?
I think so. We can continue talking while we're pouring something.